We affirm that the European Union should ban the sale of Huawei Technologies products. Yeah, definitions are contextual. The plan, the European Union should ban the sale of Huawei's technologies products as soon as possible through normal ways and means. This includes the sale of 5G infrastructure products to governments in question, but I think that's assumed. Value net benefits, there's 3 reasons to prefer. First, it's the most predictable, it's what everyone runs, unless they're running a critique. Second, it's the fairest, it allows the most ground access for both teams. Moving on to our contentions, unless there are questions. No. Awesome. Contention 1. The European Union needs secure systems. Huawei Technologies is known for the backdoors that they build into their systems, specifically giving access to the Chinese government. The British government issued a report saying that quote, there were deeply problematic flaws in its product code that could be used as a backdoor to governments or other organizations. The IT portal identifies a specific flaw in its most recent laptop release, the MateBook, that allows direct access and to total control of the laptop. Furthermore, other institutions such as the United States government worries backdoors can be used by other countries and are being used by Chinese officials. Reuters reports that the United States government has been concerned about espionage by China for years when in relation to Huawei. Now, there's a couple of things to note that are really important on this issue. Yeah, so first, it presents a huge security threat to the entirety of the European Union. Now, I know that it seems like off the top of your head that maybe a backdoor in a laptop isn't the biggest issue, but there's a couple of reasons why that's harmful. First, look to the status quo right now. We see an increase in technology such as the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things, of course, being the intercommunication between many smart devices. Why is that so important? The steps we are taking forward in right now move to a more interconnected piece of technology. Unfortunately, that means that the weakest link is the easiest path to access total control of the network. Now, if Huawei products have backdoors built into their technologies, those backdoors can be used to access control of the networks, and from there to infiltrate and place malware or otherwise steal secrets from devices on those networks.
So who's going to be infiltrating the network? The company itself?
No, these backdoors are 1, known to other organizations, 2, known to the Chinese government, most likely being used from them, and 3, even if that wasn't the case, even if they were building backdoors for the Chinese government, but they didn't want to use them, those backdoors will become known and will be used by other alternatives. Now, I know that there's going to be some response about like, oh, well, security updates, if they find them, they're going to fix them, or these corporations are good. Unfortunately, that's not what happened in the status quo. For example, the MateBook one that was previously referenced, like literally didn't go fixed for months until the United States government forced Huawei to fix it. Huawei, yes. Now, the second impact of this contention is the 5G networks. I mentioned 5G networks specifically at the top of the case because it's the biggest industry which Huawei is looking to take control of. They're marketing, they're attempting to be the main supplier of 5G infrastructure in most countries around the world, specifically in the United States, Canada, and the European Union. Why is that so important? It's simple. The European Union themselves found that 5G would be the backbone of society's most fundamental elements, from banking to transportation, health, and even democracy. Sorry, I couldn't read my own writing. Why that is so important is, again, 2 responses. First, a backdoor into the 5G system overall is incredibly hard to fix and poses an incredible threat to society. Remember, we're talking not just about like single network devices on for personal use. I mean, the world's not going to collapse if my laptop is hacked, I admit. However, at the point where we're talking about systems that are required for society to function, and we've seen governments and organizations willing to hack those before to attempt takedowns. Look like hacks on the U.S. public infrastructure and attempted infiltration into U.S. nuclear devices, things such as that. We see a huge issue. Not only that, but the corporation has the goal of this. Reuters reports that this is a Chinese state-directed project with the goal to undermine foreign infrastructure and competition. Yeah, at the end of the day, that contention comes down to this. We shouldn't allow huge backdoors to be built into our system because they probably won't be fixed even if security updates are released. I know for a fact that most people don't keep everything up to date precisely. And third, it's just bad security policy, especially when we're talking about the collapse of society. Our second contention is that Huawei products sale deserve to be banned because they're a criminal corporation that engages in many criminal activities. Governments have found evidence of Huawei committing, and this is a bit of a long list: conspiracy, money laundering, bank fraud, wire fraud, violating sanctions on Iran, obstruction of justice, trade secret theft, intellectual property theft, including those which have already been sued and settled for with other companies. Yeah.
If Huawei is capable of violating sanctions with Iran, which means it can engage in sale despite it being illegal, how is your plan?
Okay, so two things. One, like that doesn't mean you should do a ban, and two, the way they went about violating sanctions in Iran is by providing funding to an alternative company that was selling projects in Huawei. I forgot the name, but I have the article up on my laptop if anyone wants to question it. Why that's so important is specifically because of the backdoors that are being built in. Yes, they violate sanctions in Iran, but they didn't have control of the manufacturing process in order to build the backdoors. Banning Huawei products in particular is key because of the backdoor system. Also, their products should be banned because they're breaking laws. Like, crime leads to punishment. Countries have recognized this. Some of the countries with partial or full bans include Austria, Bahrain, Canada, Czech Republic, who specifically said that there were security risks with the entirety of their systems, Denmark, France, and Germany. Oh, also the United States. Okay, there's a couple of impacts for this. First, like, they're breaking the law. They need a crime to fit that. Second, intellectual laws are important because they protect the entire corporations, especially tech companies, which are really important. Sean, read that. Our third contention is talking about the global stance, specifically through the United States stance. The United States has threatened to limit its participation with the European Union, specifically in active security threat prevention, such as like terrorism and foreign invasions or like foreign interventions. Saying, quote, to limit the intelligence and shares and the help it provides if they continue to allow Huawei to participate in this economy. At the end of the day, the U.S. is a really important ally to the EU. If the U.S. will not participate with the EU, if they continue this, it like clearly outweighs anything about banning a specific product. For all those reasons, I proudly affirm. Huh? Yeah, this is not the I called it global stance. Global stance.
It's going to be some arguments about the solvency of security, and then I'm going to be talking about the disadvantage and then the affirmative case.
Where do you want me to put arguments of solvency?
U sheet.
Okay. It's not going to be with like specific relation to a contention, right? Just overall.
Just yeah.
Okay.
Everybody ready? My time begins now. We negate the resolution. The European Union should ban the sale of Huawei technology products. An overview on this argument. Right now we can see on the security argument. Right now we can see that there's literally no public evidence that Huawei is engaging in harmful security endeavors with this technology project. Literally no public evidence. According to the House Intelligence Committee report, it released no evidence conducted by the United States government, which is currently investigating Huawei technology products. Literally no evidence was released that Huawei is spying on its product users. Next, according to the United Kingdom National Security Council, there are ways to mitigate any potential security threats coming from Huawei technology products, which means it would pose no security threat to the common user. Next, according to the Financial Times, British intelligence says that 5G risks the risks of 5G from Huawei, if are actually occurring, are manageable risks that could be solved by data protection laws and regulations, which are already being written out by EU legislators. Next, we can see that the EU security concerns have a comprehensive. Huawei is going to be releasing a comprehensive, detailed plan on addressing the EU security concerns with this project. So we can see that currently EU legislators are working with the CEO of Huawei in order to mitigate these potential security risks that are coming out of the United States government. Next, according to the government communicative headquarters, we can see that there's specifically agree that there are zero security risks coming from Huawei after data protection legislation has been passed. Yes.
This is the same CEO who's currently being indicted of fraud and other crimes in the United States, right?
We'll get to that later, but yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, on to the disadvantage. The disadvantage is going to be Huawei good. Right now, the first uniqueness point is that 5G is key to economic growth and competition in the future and quality of life improvements. Where you can see that 5G is supplementary to 4G networks. It's basically cheap to install and radically improves bandwidth capability and reliability of mobile products. Look to the affirmative argument, where we specifically say 5G is going to be the backbone of society. Essentially, because the Huawei 5G technology is going to increase accessibility to the internet while at a cheap rate. Because the Huawei is key to developing 5G capabilities in Europe. The warrant for this is that the EU Commission has found that a ban would set EU 5G networks back 2 to 3 years. A UK industry consortium? A UK industry consortium found that the cost of cutting Huawei from the nation's network could cost 7 billion euros. Next, we can see that 5G allows for faster data transfer within internet-connected technology. This means that at the end of my speech. This means that on wearable devices that help victims of stroke recover or track medications or sleep levels for old people were functional. We can see that smart agriculture technology tracking allows for a lot more efficiency on food production. And we can see that self-driving cars are a lot more able to transfer data, which helps development and saves lives. Moreover, we can see that helps education. There's going to be a wider range for data, which means no more internet or dead spots. Dead spots are specifically bad because they happen in low-income areas that broadband companies don't think are worth serving. Let's move to the links. When you pass the affirmative plan, you delay the development of the 5G networks in Europe. The impact here is going to be health. We can see that people recovering from injuries, especially old people that live on stroke trackers and medicinal trackers, are probably going to be impacted because then the 5G is key to providing those people internet in order to keep up with their health. Next, we can see that it's going to impact quality of life. Better internet means it's going to be better quality of life. Next, we can see self-driving cars are going to decrease 90% of deaths from we can see that in 5G networks decrease 90% of deaths from self-driving cars can decrease 90% of car deaths from accidents, and we can see that having 5G network or good broadband internet is going to be key to that. Next, we can see education. We can see that education is the most important impact because it's the only thing that can break the cycle of poverty. The only thing that can get you out of poverty or stop your kids from becoming poor as well is providing them a good education. Having a good quality broadband network is going to be key because we can see that that's the only thing that can break the cycle of poverty for these individuals. Moreover, we can again extend the analysis. This is Huawei is going to be key to providing that cheap broadband internet to the EU. Let's move to the affirmative case. Okay, specifically we can see on the first argument they talk about how IT Portal identified that they're going to be directly affecting found a backdoor in the Huawei laptop. We can see that Nest thermostats are also easy to hack. We can see the backdoor are found into internet-connected Furbies. We can see the web-enabled body cameras. Baby cameras used to record people's houses. So we can see that this is not something unique to Huawei. Because the technology has been consistently found to have backdoors in all types of technology in all types of companies. This is not a failing of Huawei or a malpractice of Huawei. This is basically a technology misfailure that occurs in every single tech company across the world. Because that having this one specific backdoor is probably going to be non-unique to every single tech company, and probably does not mean that we should ban Huawei technology from the EU. Moreover, we can see that they talk about how the U.S. government has been concerned about backdoors for years. This is the specific argument. This is why the EU is considering banning Huawei technology, because the United States government says so. But moreover, because there's no public evidence that indicates that Huawei is actually infiltrating backdoors putting backdoors into its technology on purpose. Moreover, we can see that this is probably going to be a bias of the U.S. government because the United States has tensions with China right now and believes that the Chinese government is connected to Huawei, which obviously makes sense considering that Huawei is its biggest company. Is probably going to be propagating biased rhetoric against Huawei and trying to get other companies to ban Huawei so that China's economy cannot keep growing. And we can see that in terms of the economic war with China, a trade war with China is probably going to be better for the United States. At the point where the United States has presented zero public evidence of Huawei being a malpracticer's company and moreover has other vested interests in getting Huawei banned, that probably means that United States rhetoric is not a reason to vote affirmative. Next, we can see that for security threats, cracking the weakest link means you get access to the entire system, but constant vulnerabilities means that the system is always going to be vulnerable. that probably means that there's not something unique to Huawei as the affirmative would like to present. Next, they talk about how these backdoors are going to kill society. The argument that 5G is going to be the backbone of society is not the same thing as a backdoor in a laptop. They tell you that a backdoor occurs in the technology itself. Because the 5G internet they have literally zero warrantation as to how 5G internet is going to pose a risk to society. And moreover, we can see that 5G internet is going to be the key solvency for the negative, because 5G network is the most important technology that Huawei sends out. The only warrantation that they give you is this backdoor in a laptop found by IT Portal, which is probably not good enough warrant to win them the debate.
Especially since Huawei is working with the European government.
Especially since Huawei is cooperating with the EU government and working with the EU government in order to get this potential problem solved. Next, on the criminality argument, they tell you that Huawei has committed a lot of fraud. We can see that Trump has offered to waive the charges for concessions in the trade war. Means this is more of a political tool rather than an actual indictment of fraud considered by Huawei. At the point where Trump is considering not indicting the CEO if China makes concessions in the trade war, that probably means that the Huawei CEO, that probably is warned as to how the US government is corrupt more than Huawei is corrupt. Next, let's talk about the global stability argument. This argument makes literally no sense to me. Just because the United States is saying we should do something does not mean the EU should concede to it. Moreover, because it's probably going to be harmful, because the United States is proliferating harmful rhetoric right now in the status quo and attacking a company that provides millions of jobs to individuals for literally no reasons. The EU making concessions to this argument are probably going to proliferate this rhetoric even further and prevent companies from providing good broadband internet to people that deserve it. Yes.
How does Trump's fantasies refute arguments presented in court and proven beyond a reasonable doubt?
It was not. He has not been. First of all,
his Justice Department bringing these charges.
It's literally Trump's Justice Department bringing across these charges. Moreover, we can see that if he's willing to not indict the CEO in exchange for concessions on a trade war, that probably proves that this indictment is not occurring because of real fraud, but moreover because he wants to win a trade war. Vote nay.
Alright, is everyone ready?
Can I get an order?
Yeah, we're just going to be overview after this. Like your overview.
Sorry, what?
Okay. I'm going to talk about your overview, then half case, then that case.
Okay.
Are we all good?
So security, thingy, solvency, and then app case, then neck case.
Yeah, the stuff you said about solvency, then half case, then
Alright.
that case.
Here's the response.
Now we're good?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Alright, hi, I'm Sean. I'm explaining exactly why the EU should be banning the sale of Huawei Technologies. Let's start off on that solvency. I'm just going to go through it real quick and explain why each thing they said is wrong. First off, they said that there's no public evidence. Okay, first off, let's just use let's think about it for a second. Why would the US be saying ban this technology if they didn't have evidence, public or not, that they're doing this type of thing? Second off, again, let's just think about it for a second. They have this technology company has unnecessary back doors which allow unnecessary access to various types of internet like the 5G and all that stuff, and it's a company which my opponents concede, as my partner had said, that is state-sponsored. There would be no reason for China to state-sponsor this type of technology with a back door unless they were probably planning on using it to be having these types of things. There's just no need to have it otherwise. All right, then they tell you there's ways to mitigate. First off, Huawei is specifically bad. We specifically need to stop Huawei because we have reason to believe it would be them in particular taking advantage of these backdoors, and the best way to mitigate is not have it be a problem by banning it. They say 5G, and they say it's manageable, and they talk about how they broke the Iran sanctions. I'll deal into this more later on because they tried to refute this argument, but you'll be able to cross-apply the argument of how they're not a trustworthy actor because they're a criminal organization. Obviously, they tried to refute it. We'll deal with that more later on. It'll be clear. You okay?
No, that's all.
Yeah. All right. So now let's move on to the affirmative case. Our first contention talking about secure systems. So, their first contention here is talking about how other things also have backdoors. Yeah, I mean other things also have backdoors. First off, not all of those things are connected to 5G networks, like baby cams. A lot of this stuff is it's not the same degree of issue that a lot of these other things are. Second off, the specific reason that the backdoors with Huawei are an issue is because they're state-sponsored, meaning we have reason to believe that they would be using it to spy on other countries. We have specific reason to believe that with this specific company, they'd be using it for nefarious purposes. Also, other companies doing something bad isn't a reason not to ban this technology. Like, I'm not necessarily advocating for a ban on these technologies, but the response other people do it isn't a reason why we're wrong. It's just, yeah.
What if everyone does it? Should we ban every single tech company?
Yeah, I'm not going to argue that position. I'm just saying, pointing out that other people do something bad as well isn't a reason not to vote for us. Like, it's still bad. Yeah.
There's also a unique difference because these are built in at manufacturing and left unfixed for quite a while after they're done. Or the Huawei.
Yeah. Also, one of the differences with the Huawei stuff is that it's built in with the backdoor at manufacturing and left unfixed for a very long time, which is also uniquely different from a lot of these other companies. Also, like, they talk a lot about like the bias of the U.S. against China. I mean, U.S. might have a bias against China, but if we have a bias against China, it's because we want America and other countries to be doing well. And when China, like, we wouldn't be saying these things if it wasn't true, basically, because otherwise we'd be limiting our trade options for something good, which is in the United States and everybody else's long-term best interests. Yeah.
Also, this investigation began before Trump.
Yeah, like on 5G networks, they say systems are always vulnerable. Again, that's not a reason why Huawei is necessary. That's not a reason not to ban Huawei. That's just a reason why other stuff might also be vulnerable. Second, basically cross-apply everything I just said about other systems anyways. Yeah. Also, they talk about why is 5G important. Like, I might be misunderstanding their argument here. I apologize. They talk about like why we're saying 5G is so important. Like, they give you a bunch of reasons why 5G is so important in their own thing. So we need to stop Huawei from having these backdoors. Second off, the way Huawei goes about using this technology is that it can be used to spy on certain issues. Like, imagine if Angela Merkel had a Huawei phone that then had a backdoor, so then Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany. So then the Chinese government can go in there and steal German secrets. Like, that's one of the issues with this type of thing, is that we don't know the full extent of it, and it's not worth the risk. Yeah.
Like, the specific issues that they're set to be the main developer of 5G technology, and 5G technology connects to like a bunch of government.
Like, they're set to be one of the biggest producers of this 5G technology, and that specifically links up to a lot of government-run things, which means through these back doors, which we're specifically aware of China and Huawei, could have backdoor information to government secrets, which China could use to get a head start, which obviously is bad, because China's like not the person we want to be in control of things, for obvious human rights violations, things, etc. All right. Now, moving on to our second contention, criminal organization. The only refutation they could use to why this isn't true is because Trump offered to, I believe was offered to waive her charges. I'm going to say pardon, that might not be accurate, but it's just the word I'm going to use. To tell you this means it's probably a political ploy. I mean, everything in politics is political, sure. None of these are reasons why she's not a criminal, though. I mean, okay, Trump is offering to pardon her in exchange to win a trade war. That has absolutely nothing to do with anything criminal brought up in court. And quite frankly, chances are that if anybody like the DOJ, if you just look at the numbers on it, tends not to go after people and actually indict them and take them to court unless chances are they're going to win. And if chances are they're going to win, which we know it's more likely than not it is, then that means that it's been proven beyond a reasonable doubt that these companies actually did violate these laws. Therefore, it's irrelevant if Trump wanted to pardon them. But either way, let's just think about it logically for a second. Trump doing something means somebody probably didn't commit a crime because political play. Look, people have been having issues with Huawei for years, long before Trump was in office. Yeah.
Another response is they completely ignore like all of the countries that found security problems.
Yeah, like they also ignore like the fact that my partner gave you a bunch of different countries, all of which also found security issues. Last time I checked, Trump is not the president of those countries too. He probably wants to be, but he's not. Right, now moving on to our third contention, they tell you it's a global stance. They tell you that the U.S. promotes harmful rhetoric and that it doesn't make sense. They don't really expand on this, so I don't know how to work. Like, they tell you it doesn't make sense, I'll explain why it does make sense. They tell you harmful rhetoric, I'm not really sure what this harmful rhetoric is. It's especially not, I'm assuming it's talking about like the criminal stuff. It's not harmful rhetoric in other countries and it's being proven that it's true. Also, the thing they need to understand, like, they say it doesn't make sense, let me just explain why it's true. The issue with this whole global stance thing is that the U.S. is threatening the European Union that if they don't ban Huawei, they're going to stop doing stuff with the EU. That's uniquely important, is because EU-U.S. Relations are incredibly important to global stability. Yeah.
So does the U.S. often threaten other countries that if you don't ban Huawei, we're going to stop trade with you?
No, they don't often ban other countries by asking them what they're going to do if they don't ban Huawei. That's why this is especially to be taken into consideration, because they're doing it right now and they don't usually. Anyway, like I was saying, yeah. anyways, like I was saying, it's incredibly important to U.S. relations, and it's good for global stability to have this type of thing, so we need to preserve it. Now let's move on to the negative case. They tell you that Huawei is good. Their first uniqueness is that 5G is good. Yeah, we both agree that 5G is good, which is why I don't want a company in control of it with backdoors to the whole system. That's a unique reason. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, if 5G is good, I want it to be secure. So yeah, moving on. Like, they tell you there's going to be a delay. Look, there very well might be a delay. One, if there's a delay of great importance that it's obvious to the point that Huawei's not going to be able to do this effectively, chances are other places are going to be able to try to fill in the gap because people like making money. And also, like, they give you a bunch of impacts as relating to the delay, but all of these impacts are outweighed by the fact that the back door would cause worse things because giving the Chinese secret governments could cause to far worse problems down the line. Yeah,
we're not pulling out current technology, and 5G would take a while to implement with those in poverty.
We're not pulling out current technology, and getting this 5G to poor individuals anyway would take a long time regardless. They're not solving anything. Thank you.
I am going to go in the exact same order. So the security, like the lack of security risk, then the two advantages, and then the disadvantage. Everyone ready?
I'm sorry, I missed that. In the same order, so
Yeah, same order.
overview, security, criminal corporation, global stance, then maybe decide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Everyone ready?
Mm-hmm.
Time starts now. On the security arguments, the first response that they make is that the U.S. would not say to ban it if it wasn't a real security risk. They concede Esch's analysis that right now Huawei is a threat to vested interests in the U.S. If you look specifically at Huawei's market share in the EU, you can see that it's beginning to overtake U.S. corporations like Google and Apple. The U.S. has a vested business interest in the EU banning Huawei because number one, that means that it can always outcompete the EU because it'll get 5G internet faster, and number two, it means that U.S. corporations in the EU are going to be able to not deal with EU companies instead of having to compete with Huawei, which is always easier for them because Huawei is more competition, which means that U.S. companies get more money. Basically, these vested interests are the reasons that the U.S. is saying to ban Huawei, so it can improve its own business interests. They try to tell you that Huawei is still specifically bad because it allows for unnecessary backdoors and is state-sponsored. Two responses here. First, for the unnecessary backdoors, you can see that Huawei right now is cooperating with the EU government in order to close these backdoors. This goes conceded out of Esch's speech. You can see that as of right now, Huawei is actively working to mitigate security risks, which means that these backdoors are now being closed. They tell you that in the past, backdoors took 1.5 months to close. But they concede that as of right now, what's going on is that the EU is working with Huawei to close these backdoors right now. The next argument is that when they tell you that Huawei is state-sponsored, this is obviously going to be true. Because Huawei operates out of China, it needs state approval, otherwise it won't be able to function. But when it comes to the point where literally every company in China is state-sponsored, and this is justification for banning every single company in China, you can see that this isn't a real reason to view Huawei as a threat. You can see that we tell you all of these ways that the security risk of Huawei can be mitigated. From the House Intelligence Report, from two separate UK investigations, they try to tell you that banning is the best mitigation. But when it comes to the point where you can keep security while also gaining the benefits of 5G, there's no actual reason to ban and lose all the benefits of 5G, which means that you're going to be voting for the negation. On the first contention about secure systems, the biggest thing that you're going to be taking away is that every network is always going to be insecure. Huawei is not special. They try to tell you that not everything is connected, but they themselves give you this analysis about the Internet of Things and this increased interconnectivity of regular devices. When you look at things that Escher reads to you, like Nest thermostats, internet-connected Furbies, and web-enabled baby cameras, all of these are connected to the internet and connected to the network, which by their own analysis about how the weakest link is all you need to break, means that once you get into any of these devices, you have access to the entire network. Which means that if China wants to spy, it can spy no matter what. There's always going to be an insecure device because it's impossible to cover every single base, meaning that they have no offense. They try to tell you that everyone doing a bad thing doesn't mean we should stop bad things. But what this does mean is that no matter what the affirmation does, these networks are going to be insecure. Meaning that in the negation world and in the affirmation world, these networks are not going to be protected. They have no impacts. Yes?
Do you know of any financial institutions or health organizations that have Furbies or baby monitors on their networks?
I mean, when it comes to the point where they're asking me if hospitals have baby monitors, I'm pretty sure the answer is fairly clear. Also, considering the fact that financial institutions use credit scanners and use online and have internet connected like webcams to track like where the money is and like tracking like robbers and stuff, and these cameras have been proven to be vulnerable. You can see that these networks are vulnerable.
I'm sure every building has a thermostat.
Yeah, I'm like also every building has a thermostat. You're not going to walk into a bank with no air conditioning, which means that internet-connected thermostats also, like insecure internet-connected thermostats, also mean that these networks are going to be insecure. And also you can see that as long as they're connected to an outside Wi-Fi network, you don't need to breach it internally. As long as you breach the outside Wi-Fi network, you can still get access to the data on the inside. If Angela Merkel's phone is Wi-Fi connected, as long as you get access to the network that it's sending data on, you don't even have to breach the phone. This is why this contention literally does not matter. It has no impact because all of the impacts here happen in either world. They try to tell you Huawei is specifically bad because the backdoors are always built in and they're unfixed. But you can see that because there's always a backdoor, this doesn't matter. And because Huawei is specifically working with the EU government, Huawei is probably going to be uniquely better than these other corporations. They try to tell you again that America wouldn't say bad things about Huawei if they weren't true, because it doesn't want to limit trade. But when it comes to the point where the US is actively sanctioning China and limiting trade despite multilateral trade being good, and when it comes to the point where the US has vested business interests against Huawei, you can see very specific reasons why the US would try to ban Huawei in other countries, even if Huawei wasn't bad. They try to tell you that the risk of China stealing data is enough reason to vote affirmative. But when it comes to the point where China can steal data literally no matter what you do, you're going to see that this isn't a voting issue. On the second advantage, about Huawei is criminal. They try to tell you that this has nothing to do with trade, and the DOJ doesn't indict people unless there's enough evidence. And that the investigation started before Trump was in power. You can see that there are a couple of responses here. First, the rise of Huawei as a large tech company did not happen until after Trump took power. Huawei was relatively small until a few years ago, and once it started rising, that's when the US started to be concerned and look into investigations into it. There's no reason for the DOJ to investigate Huawei until it's large enough, and it only became large enough to be a concern very recently under the Trump administration. You can see that this investigation is completely politically motivated. Like the U.S. federal government would not be willing to waive criminal charges unless those criminal charges were a sham to begin with. The fact that Trump is willing to waive these criminal charges in exchange for concessions in the trade war clearly prove that it's an economic and political play, not an actual criminal one. Meaning that the only country that finds Huawei to be criminal is only doing it for political reasons. They try to read to you that other countries also banned Huawei for security issues, and that proves that the US isn't the only one. But when it comes to the point where the US is actively pressuring other countries into doing it, and they only list smaller countries that are either, like Canada, reliant on the US for trade, or like small enough for the US to influence them super easily, you can see that the only reason these countries are doing this is because the US is threatening them.
The other countries have not found security risks, they've just banned them because the US
Yeah, these other countries haven't found security risks, they've just banned them because the US told them to. They try to tell you that the US threats are bad, and they don't want to trigger them and cut off trade. But you can see that because the US is already in a trade war with China, it can't afford another trade war with the EU. You can also see that relations between the EU and the US are already super low. They're already as low as they're going to be because Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel keep criticizing Trump, which means that no matter what you do, the relationships aren't going to get lower. And as of right now, there is no trade war. There's no reason for a trade war to occur in the future. On the disadvantage, they massively undercover the disadvantage. We give you all of these reasons why 5G is good, and we also give you reasons why Huawei is key to having 5G in the EU. Their only response here is that if 5G is good, they want it to be secure. But when they make way too many concessions about how 5G or internet in general is never going to be secure, that means that you're going to prefer Huawei's 5G because it happens sooner. They try to tell you that, and it's cheaper. They try to tell you that 5G is hard to implement for people in poverty. But when they concede the basic technology of 5G, that it's additive onto 4G networks, because all you do is add like hundreds of antennas onto 4G towers, you can see that 5G is cheap to implement, and you can see that it's easy to extend the range of existing data networks, which specifically covers the dead spots we talk about. We tell you that Huawei is fixing itself in the status quo and cooperating with the government, which means that it's uniquely better. Because while other countries may have less security risks now, long term Huawei has less because of its cooperation with the EU government, which means that Huawei is a uniquely better actor. Vote then.
Okay. I'm just going to go over security risk arguments and then the disadvantage. Is everybody ready?
Is there like are you addressing the overview under security risks or no?
Just like treat
It's just
security
going to
risks
be
as a
general.
whole.
Yeah, it's a couple of
Oh, should I float as a separate voter then?
Sure, if you want to. Is everybody ready? My time begins now. There's 3 specific arguments on the security risk that's going to be winning the negative activity. The first argument is that there's going to be no security risk coming out of Huawei technology. They concede the argument that there's no public evidence that Huawei is engaging in malpractice in terms of its technology. The only response here is, if there was no malpractice, why would the U.S. indict the CEO? Why would the U.S. be making these claims? And the answer is that the U.S. makes these claims because they have vested economic and political interest in indicting Huawei that comes outside of its technology. The U.S. says that Huawei is committing fraud because they know that Huawei is out-competing their businesses. That is why the U.S. is making these indictments. So at the point where they're conceding that there's no public evidence that there's a security risk coming out of Huawei technology, that probably means that there's no reason to do their affirmative plan. But let's say you believe that there are risks out of Huawei technologies and there are potential security concerns with implementing this technology in the EU. They also concede analysis that these risks are manageable. They concede that the UK National Security Council says that there's ways to mitigate these potential risks to the point where there is no risk at all. They concede that British intelligence says that 5G risks are manageable. They concede that the government communication headquarters says that there's almost no potential risk. There's no potential risk from 5G networks because of the fact that they can implement data protection regulation. So at the point where the EU can put in this regulation and make sure that the affirmative plan is solid in the status quo, that probably means that there's no reason to do the affirmative plan. If these security risks are going to go away through EU cooperation and through data protection regulation, that means why would you ban the technology? Why would you prevent people from having cheap, accessible internet if you can just solve this problem with regulation? They have no answer to these questions, which is why you're probably voting negative right there. But next, let's believe that you think that these risks are not manageable. No one is going to be able to solve these security concerns coming out of Huawei. They additionally concede that other technologies have the exact same security concerns. They concede that thermostats can be hacked and thermostats are connected to 5G networks. They concede that Furbies, literally children's toys, can have this argument. Because these exist in homes as well, in which financial information and health information is also stored. They concede that hospitals probably have baby monitors, which can equally be easily hacked. So at the point where all technology is going to be equally hackable and backdoors are present in almost all types of technology, that probably means that there's no unique reason to ban Huawei. The only argument they have here is sure, other companies are bad, but we still need to ban Huawei. Why? Why do we need to ban Huawei at the point where they're not doing any type of security concern that's unique from other types of companies? There's no malpractice occurring in terms of Huawei, which is why there's no reason to ban it. But we can see there's going to be a direct cost with banning Huawei. They make the argument that it's probably going to be a good idea to vote affirmative on the chance for solving security concerns. But that doesn't work out because they concede almost the entirety of the disadvantage. They concede that Huawei is key to developing 5G capabilities in Europe. They concede that the EU Commission found that a ban would set EU 5G networks back 2 to 3 years. And they concede that 5G network is the backbone of society. They read this argument to themselves. That 5G network is the backbone of society. It's key to health. It's key to education. It's key to large systemic impacts such as agriculture and food production. Without food production, people starve and die. So the point where these are large-scale impacts such as education, agriculture, and food production, that probably means you're voting negative. This straight outweighs the crime contention because there's no impact for being a criminal. But we can see that we directly affect lives and quality of life. This is probably outweighing in terms of magnitude, but moreover in probability, because we can see there's several arguments to believe that Huawei is not a security concern, but there is no reason to believe that killing Huawei is going to hurt lives. When they have no analysis on the disadvantage whatsoever, that's probably a straight vote for the negative. Because we give you at least 8 reasons as to why Huawei is not a security concern. The only argument they have functioning is that other countries have banned Huawei too. But at the point where all of these countries are allied with the United States and probably have vested economic interest in banning Huawei as well, that probably is not a reason to ban Huawei and is a direct vote for the negative.
Okay. Order is going to be third contention, third aft contention, second aft contention, disadvantage, and first aft contention. And I know that order is a little bit confusing, but some of the stuff builds on each other, so I want to get the stuff that isn't really complicated and linking to a bunch of other arguments out of the way first, so my signposting doesn't get a whole convoluted. Does that make sense? Okay. So starting on a third contention of global stance, they give you several responses coming out of the 1 and C, but both of those are responded to, and we extend our impact. Specifically extend the impact about U.S. security agreements with the European Union. They concede the articulation coming out of my speech and my partner's speech about how U.S. intelligence sharing is key for global and specifically European Union security, especially against terrorist threats. Look to like the rise of terrorist threats in cities such as Paris and Britain. Why? They also concede that the United States will probably end this at the point where their POI is answered, that quite literally the United States never does this before, and they generally follow through on the steps. At the end of the day, that's a clear place to vote AF over the NEC. Why? Like global security, threats to lives will outweigh any of what they're talking about, specifically with a delay to the 5G network, not a 5G network as a whole. Their link's only a 2-year delay. Next, moving on to the second contention of criminal corporation. I have a couple of responses, but the first is an overview on how they choose to argue it. They choose to argue this contention by saying that the United States government has a motive to lie about these charges. Okay, even if they prove that there's motive, that's not enough to prove that they did lie. At the end of the day, we provide evidence saying that this is true. We provide other alternatives, specifically a British government report, which I'll read a little bit later. But at the end of the day, even if you buy their argument about motive, it's not reason to not buy our argument. Second, specifically on the motive, I have a couple of things that go drop throughout the round. They tell you a couple of things specifically that one, Huawei only recently became a threat, and two, Trump wouldn't allow the drops to these charges if it didn't happen in the status quo. However, both of those arguments have been previously responded to. On the first one, saying that they've only become recently. Okay, my partner tells you that A, that's not true. They've been having good smartphone sales globally and in the United States since the release of their P series back in the 2000s. Second, this investigation began before Trump and before they became a powerhouse, which is a clear direct attack on this. Remember, they concede that this investigation precedes Trump by several years. That's especially true at the point where it precedes Huawei becoming a powerful technology. If they were investigated before they become powerful, the investigation probably wasn't motivated by their power. Third, or moving on to their second response, that Trump wouldn't threaten to veto if this was, or threaten wouldn't drop charges. Okay, minor side note, Trump has dropped charges for people who are guilty, including in Arizona, like Arizona sheriff who Joe of Ohio. Like as my partner says, Trump threatening to pardon is not reason to buy it. Like he literally says that in his speech.
Stop time.
Yeah.
The argument that Trump is threatening to waive these charges, which probably means that he's not guilty, came out of my speech, but this argument about the Arizona sheriff and this new evidence is new out of your speech.
Okay, Judge, the argument about Trump pardon not being enough to buy their argument comes out of my second speech. I won't deny that the Arizona evidence is specifically new, but A, new evidence is allowed to prove an old point, at least like under some rules such as JASA. I don't know what rules this tournament has like specifically. And two, like you're still buying the argument because it goes conceded, whether or not you buy the evidence. I'm ready to resume time when you are. Right? I have 2:20. Starting now. So at this point, you're buying the criminal corporation. Why is that affecting? Oh, also, even if you don't buy this argument, buy the British government report that I read under my first contention. I'm sorry to jump around, but I do read this evidence in my first contention. Specifically, quote, the British government issued a report that found deeply problematic flaws in its product code that could be used as a backdoor that were shared with Chinese governments and other entities. Again, that's a report like coming out of my first speech. I literally say that word for word. Why is that so important? Again, it's on more evidence. They tell you that our country shouldn't be bought because they're only changing because of the U.S. Bullying. But they completely concede where I say several countries, including the Czech Republic, Denmark, France, and Germany, have also found similar security flaws. So that's reason to buy it. Why is it so important? They concede our impact scenario about how the intellectual property laws are necessary for the global economy to function, specifically because tech industries are the largest industry functioning in our world right now. At that point, it's pretty clear you have to buy this. Now, moving on to the disadvantage, right? Okay, Judge, minor side note, even if you buy the disadvantage, it's a 2-year delay to a system that's probably going to take at least 10 years to implement. That's not that much magnitude at the end of the day. Second, and
point of order. Like we've been telling you that this is fast and cheap to implement the entire round. Any arguments about how it takes 10 years to implement is new.
Okay, the argument specifically about how the mitigation attack comes out of my partner's speech about how the delay is outweighed by other concerns. Sure, I didn't say 10 years before. But then again, you didn't say how long it would take. Anyway, I'm resuming time now. Judge, even if you're not buying that, remember my partner's specific articulation about why 5G technology is so unique and so specific. They tell you that it's cheap and easy to implement. However, what they gloss over and what my partner says is that it requires other updates to how handheld technology in order to access the benefits of the 5G network. Specifically, my partner tells you how it would most likely require a new expensive smartphone. Like current Huawei products are going for over nearly $1,000, and that's really important because it means that their impact would likely be delayed 2 to 3 years anyway. Now, moving on to
Hero.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know you said your partner said it, but neither of us have anything floated about how you need new technology in order to access 5G networks.
I have it on my phone.
It's
Like
just
discussion.
discretion.
It came out at like the very end of my partner's speech when I
I'm sure if the article is too expensive to do.
So anyway, judge discretion. Starting time now. Moving on to the security system today, because that got really convoluted. So they collapse down to 3 things. 1, that there's no risks from Huawei technology. 2, that we concede risks that are manageable. And 3, that we concede other tech companies have these risks. Let's address both of these using the flow. First, we concede no risks of Huawei technology. The easy way to decide that is they concede the articulation in this first speech about the British government issuing a report. They also concede their articulation about the IT portal, specifically about how it was known to the manufacturers and to the Chinese government, but not fixed. Again, that's like clear articulation. Why is that so important? Again, actually, cross-apply that to their... I'll get to that in a second. Their second response was that these risks are manageable. However, look at their evidence. Their evidence says the risks are manageable by law, yet they drop my partner's response that Huawei repeatedly breaks laws. I have 51 seconds.
Pause time.
Oh,
It's been
oops.
paused for a while. We're out
Yeah.
of time.
Oh, my bad. And 3, like cross-apply my partner's argument about how other tech systems are different because the Chinese government doesn't have knowledge of it. Yeah. Sorry about that. I didn't realize my time was
Yeah.
passed. Did you notice that in my speech?